Hi, this is my presentation, The 5-Thread Model, Australia's Shift to Multiculturalism by Anne Marie Bedard. So I did mine on the Policy Journal, and I used the 5-Thread Model of Academic Policy Entrepreneurs from the White Australia Policy to Multicultural Australian by Julius Mock, which was published in September 11, 2025. This explores how the 5-Thread Model was used to transform Australia from having the white Australian policy to the multiculturalism policy, and as a real example of how policy and policy processes and different models can have real life change in the world. So the background of how this came to be and why it was needed. So Australia was formed as a British colony, and they wanted to keep their population British and keep a British culture, quote unquote. And to do that, they implemented the Immigration Restriction Act in 1901. So this added tests where you had to write in whatever European language was selected for you. So let's say like you speak English, but you don't speak French. They would give you the French test. That way you would automatically fail it. This let immigration officers restrict anyone who wasn't white into coming into the country. Because there was this long history of wanting to, quote unquote, keep Britishness, keep whiteness, all that, they needed a really strong game plan in order to create a persuasive case to change the culture in Australia. So the game plan: first, they're going to make the issue known to get support. Then they're going to make politicians need to have this issue on their platform in order to get reelected. They're going to do this by showing businesses how discriminatory policies affect profit margins and exclude economic growth, and they're going to use this momentum to pass legislation. Okay, so a summary. So one, they need to identify non-white Australians that were at a generational disadvantage. So they were able to prove that non-white Australians suffered disproportionately to white Australians. Basically, they weren't able to get good jobs. They were at the hands of systemic racism, and it was really negative. But, people who weren't, empathetic to this or weren't suffering it from themselves didn't really care. So what was really effective is they showed that discrimination was reducing economic prosperity. Now, this is what gives people attention, is money. So after they got businesses' attention, businesses were pressuring politicians, let's be less racist, it'll be better for the economy to have more immigrants come here and work. And people are not going to want to come here if we're discriminating against them actively. And China's not going to want to trade with us if we treat their people terribly. Okay, and then they wanted to eventually pass legislation, which they did. And so the final, big movement was passing the Racial Discrimination Act, which was super exciting. Here's some pictures of the unions getting together right here and here. Stop White Australia policies. Here's the White Australia policy. And then this is a journal that posted the high cost of White Australia and why the Financial Review was for adding multiculturalism to Australia. Here's the 5-thread model. This is what the journal used to break it down in a visual sense. So policy researchers were able to create effective and institutional change using this model, which is super cool. Their studies brought together interest groups. Again, they targeted money, they targeted finance. This is where people actually care. They targeted politicians through that money because, the politicians are fueled by money. So then they put these in their platforms, and because politicians are the highest viewed by society, now society sees that this is important, and then they were able to implement and pass policy. Chinese immigration to Australia. So you can see the rapid increase of immigrants from China to Australia post-policy results. The removal of racist policies, again, created incentives for Chinese immigration, which increased economic growth and better trade relations. So you can see a huge spike from where we started to where we are now, which is great. Here are my citations. But yeah, I just want to emphasize how cool it is that we're able to use the 5-thread model to see effective change and to pass legislation and to completely change a culture that was once, highly racist, only allowing white people in the country, to a place of, multiculturalism, complete increase in immigration, and overall acceptance of non-white people in Australia. Thank you.